If I can garden, so can you. You know, I don't even have a garden gate, but if I did, I think I'd put it here just so I could open it up and let you all in. Well, it may not sound like it because that was some early March, early morning garden ASMR walking through the grass right there. It may not sound like it, but it's going to get up to about 50 degrees Fahrenheit today. It's going to start warming up. We may have a few cold stretches in front of us, but it's going to start warming up. And right now is such an interesting time, I think, in the life of a gardener. For some people, we've already started some of our seeds inside. We have a whole bunch more to start if you're starting from seed. A whole bunch more to start over the next couple of months before we actually, here in Zone 5, Wisconsin, before we get outside. And I have to tell you that today's video was inspired in part by some of the work that we've been trying to do over the last couple of years, but also as a result of a comment that I saw on a post in a Facebook gardening group that I'm a part of. And the comment specifically called out the idea that there might be people who are gardening gatekeepers. Now, I don't actually use the term gatekeeping in general, but I did find the premise behind the comment to be quite interesting. You know, the point that the person was trying to make is one that I think is quite valid. And that is that we're all approaching gardening from a different background, from a different knowledge set, from a different level of experience. Some people gardening for 30, 40 years on massive garden plots. Some people have been gardening for 2 or 3 weeks just on their kitchen counter when it comes to growing herbs, something like that. We all have a different amount of time that we can spend with our garden. We all have a different gardening space, different gardening setup. It's one of the cool things about gardening is just how unique it is to each and every one of us. And I think one of the things that often happens is we take our experiences, our successes, and then we say to ourselves, this is the way that gardening should or must be done, and therefore this is the way other people should or must do gardening. Now, in many cases, I would agree that there are some aspects or features of gardening that go beyond the individual experience. I mean, there are some truisms that have been around for a long time. Plant the potatoes when the dandelions bloom. I mean, you've probably heard some of these that function or that work well as a general principle. Where I think part of the struggle, and where I think this is the element of community that I wanted to really talk about in this video, where I think part of the struggle comes in, though, is when somebody has less knowledge on a topic, or is just learning or just getting into gardening, and they ask a question that has an answer that seems quite obvious to us, or they're experimenting around in the garden or growing something in a way that we haven't had success with, and they ask for feedback or advice. And I think a human tendency is, when you know the answer, believe you know the answer, when the answer is obvious to you, to respond in a way that maybe is discouraging to somebody who is starting off or learning or getting into the process of gardening, because it's such an obvious answer, in your opinion. I don't want this video to come off like a lecture at all. I've thought about this quite a bit, quite extensively, and it's not a lecture because I do the same thing. I have some of the same thoughts when it comes to somebody else doing something that I know in all likelihood won't work. But then it's kind of like the teacher in me, the one who's been teaching for 18 years, who has to constantly go back every year and remember where my students are, those who are just coming into my class for the first time, who don't have the same knowledge base that I have, and I have to try to remember where I was when I was in their shoes. And sometimes we have this expectation of knowledge that just isn't reasonable. You know, one of the beautiful things about gardening is you will believe that you have a process in place that produces optimal results, that you are just getting phenomenal production, and that's the way it has to be. And then somebody will come along with a completely different method of growing that same vegetable, fruit, what have you, and they'll get even better production, or they'll get similar production. There is science involved. There's certainly the absolute importance of fertile soil, fertile mix, whatever it is that you're using to grow in, whatever medium. But there is a lot of leeway. And I think that is so inviting. I think that's such an inviting element of gardening, to know that you can experiment around, that you can play around, and you can come up with successes in ways that other people haven't even imagined. And so I think this is where our responsibility to our community is so important. The way we interact with other gardeners, and I've said this many times, I think the gardening community is one of the greatest communities out there because they're so willing to share. They're willing to share knowledge, they're willing to share seeds, they're willing to share plants, they're willing to share vegetables. There's a sharing community. I do think it's important when we're sharing information, when we're sharing our own knowledge, that we do it with the right mentality, that we are encouraging other people to garden. I think that is so important. I don't want anyone to come away from our videos discouraged. I don't want anyone who walks by in my community to come through, see my garden, and walk away in any way discouraged. In fact, if somebody walks by from my community and has a question, typically speaking, I'm gonna try to get them in to see a tour, to see all the things we're doing, because I think it's important to see just how many ways we're taking advantage of limited space. And if somebody comes along and says, I don't have any space, but they have a kitchen counter somewhere where they can grow some herbs, I want to be the person who encourages them. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Like, when I think about the value that comes from gardening, it goes far beyond the amazing fruits and vegetables and herbs and everything else that we're growing here. It goes far beyond that, because it's a set of skills. You know, as we move from an agrarian economy where so many people lived on farms and so many people had the basic skills of gardening and farm life, to a more urban society where fewer people are responsible for creating more food, I think the focus on the individual garden really decreased. And I don't think that those skills are ever going to fully go away, but I want to encourage as many people as possible to learn to know those skills. I want to be able to encourage the younger generation, and I think we should all have that mindset of that next generation is going to come in, and we want them to be able to say, okay, I know how to take care of myself. I know how to be self-sufficient as much as possible in any given space wherein I find myself living. You know, when I was really young, I think we had something like 3 or 4 channels on our TV, something that I think the current generation doesn't really know that much about. But one of the channels that came in loud and clear had a cooking show on it, and I actually just looked this up just to make sure I got the year that it started correct, which was 1982. But it was a cooking show called Yan Can Cook. Now, if you remember that show, you should definitely comment that you saw it in our comments down below. But the slogan, the catchphrase of that show was, if Yan can cook, so can you. And I think our goal as a community should be, if I can garden, so can you. I think that's a very important goal. We want to encourage gardeners. We want to make them a part of our community. We want to bring as many of those experiences together to gain as much knowledge as possible. You know, we have no idea who some of these incredibly intelligent people are who have never moved their minds toward gardening, and what kinds of creations, experimentations that they might develop as a part of their own gardening experience if they shifted their focus that way. So encouraging those individuals, I think, is incredibly important. It doesn't matter to me how small that garden plot is. It doesn't matter to me whether you're indoors, outdoors. Maybe you have a massive traditional garden. Maybe you have one little raised bed. I want you to be encouraged to grow, and I want our community to do the same. All right, this is the last thing I'm going to say on this topic. This is a little bit of a different video than what I normally put together, in terms of I'm sitting here just talking to you, but I think it's an important topic because I want you to be encouraged, especially as we move into that garden planning, garden growing season here. The last thing I'm going to say is we've been doing several live streams of late, and the focus of those live streams has been on community pictures, because I think that's another way that I can help, hopefully, gather in some of that community and bring in and encourage people and show people new ideas by looking at the gardens of our community members, whether that's the indoor focus, whether that's the pests that we've talked about, etc. And so hopefully we're doing a little bit of our part there as well. Next month, my goal is to have a live stream where we focus in on garden oddities. And what I mean by that is, sometimes we get fruits, vegetables in the strangest places looking strange. I think it's just an enjoyable topic, kind of a lighthearted topic. We also have quail. Some of the eggs that they've laid in the past have been pretty strange. And so I would include any of the garden animals or the farm animals as well, the oddities there. I think that would be an interesting topic. So if you have a garden oddity, a picture that you'd like to share with us so we can put it on our live stream, just email that to gutengardening@gmail.com. I'm hoping to see some really good input from our community as well. Hey, let's open the gates to our gardens. Even if you don't have a gate, let's encourage as many people as possible to be a part of something that provides mental, physical health, so many benefits that we've talked about in other videos. And hopefully we're encouraging more and more gardeners on a regular basis. Folks, if you enjoyed today's video and found it useful, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.